Hello guys. So what's up? Today is Monday, which means it's time to dive into the market. Now I'll look for a sell-off situation, and well, it's already observed on the first pair. There is a maximum. The maximum was made on high volume, after which there was a good downward movement. But we are recovering and approaching this maximum with 3 confident candles. There is a suggestion that we will break through. Plus we have a gap that needs to be covered. Cool. Awesome. Let's take a look. There's a lot of volume from the buyer above. The support below is so-so, and there's resistance. I can assume that after breaking this maximum, a pullback movement might occur and the seller appears in this candle. Param-pam-pam. But why did we come here? With this moment, we have already covered some part of the gap, but the gap remains not fully covered, and gaps do get covered. And what is this if not covering the gap? Now, but a night's move, 2 minutes. Up 2 minutes, because we are currently pulling back from this. And we took it off. Got it. Understood. I made a little mistake here. Oh well, for the strong side, for the buyer, to cover the gap, we might need to use a follow-up for 4 minutes. And basically, if this 2-minute move doesn't work, the next follow-up will be opened for 4 minutes for a longer duration. Why for an increase? Why not a pullback? I would gladly consider a pullback movement here because we have a good buyback. Because after this buyback, there was a downward movement because this buyback was done on a large volume. But there's one but, and this but is called a gap, which is always covered sooner or later. And if here we already tried to cover this gap, bounced down, didn't go further down, and went up again. Why did we go up? To try to fully cover this gap, of course. And we are approaching this maximum with good candles. That is, there is a chance that this was done recently, and if there is not a strong seller here, then we will ultimately go higher again to cover this gap. There you go. So essentially, the entry here is based on logic. I use a follow-up immediately, 4 minutes for an increase. All right, and for now, we'll place it like this. We wait. 5 seconds remain until the end, which was to be expected. I return the amount, show the trading view, and we go higher again. That's what we needed. A good seller appears above, and that's a fact. Do not enter further here for the continuation of the movement. Also, on this candle, the volume from the seller increased, but that was after this maximum was removed. An attempt is made, and that's already excellent. In general, let's look for the situation further. By the way, traders, look, I'll click through now and show you something. Gap, covered, gap was covered, gap only half, covered, gap was covered very quickly. I don't see a gap here. EuroCAD, gap, covered, gap not covered properly, but it was covered about halfway for sure. Yes, the gap was covered quickly, gap covered. I don't see a gap covered, gap half covered, gap almost completely covered, gap covered immediately. Gap covered halfway, a little more, gap fully covered. You understand what I mean, right? So now another situation. Let's try to analyze GBP AUD. Let's take a pause. We reached halfway, got a pullback movement higher, didn't go further. There are fewer sellers, more buyers in the area, but they went even lower. The minimum wasn't updated. Some buybacks are happening again. Down below, damn, there's a really strong buyer present here. 10 minutes until the end of the candle. There's good movement here. Where might a buyer appear? A buyer might appear in this area next. Where is this movement going? It's going to update this minimum. That is, theoretically, I can assume that they might reach this minimum with such a strong movement. But I have a question. A buyer appeared here. The buyer was weak in terms of volume. The buyer was weak in the cluster. The movement didn't continue upwards. The movement continued downwards, where a buyer appears again, but this time a strong buyer. By the ticks, yes, we see how much stronger it is than it was here. Here it's 50-50. The pullback in principle was an entered, but the goal was not achieved. That is, I don't see the point in entering on a pullback after such a movement. But entering for a decrease would make sense in principle if there were facts to support it. For now, we are holding above the zone of interest by the body, and that's good. But the buyers are really tough. I think we might be able to make a bigger move here. But to predict that, we need to see the candle close. Right now, there is no candle close, so I wouldn't enter such a situation. I'm looking further. A safe situation, in principle, is currently absent on the 15-minute chart. Where could I enter? Only if I already enter, it would be with risk. Therefore, I will switch to the hourly chart and see what's happening there. Euro dollar, I like the situation. Euro USD, 4 minutes. An entry for a decrease will be made. The amount for catching up. So I have this thing set up. It is set. I need more of such large trades. I'll explain what right now immediately caught my eye. The first thing that caught my eye was this large buyback from the seller and the fact that the area of interest is pushing and very strong at 2,320 ticks. That is, there is resistance here. In this part, they don't let the buy. Sellers let the buyer go higher, and they have set up a good wall and want to go down from here. That is, there is a good volume in the area, but not enough to go down. There is a large buyback for further downward movement. I don't take this increased volume because initially there was a good downward movement, but we see a large buyback. That is, the volume increased because initially there appeared the buyer here. But this buyer, as I see it, was simply suffocated. Now, the most interesting part, logically, initially, there was a downward movement here. This minimum was made. What does the buyer do next? The buyer makes this movement upwards, but does not reach this maximum. Again, a downward movement. Here we should go to update this minimum and continue our trend. But an upward movement occurs. They pass, make this maximum, after which the downward movement begins again. Now it looks like a breakdown and nothing unusual. That is further downward movement along the trend. To know this for sure, I need to see an approach here. If the buyer starts picking up again here, then it might turn into a sideways movement. If they still pass the nearest stop, then this movement is already towards the next stop along the trend, and then it can definitely be certain that it was a breakdown. The factors for a decrease are present, and it's enough for me to take a small profit here, a minute. Then 25 seconds remain until the end. We wait a little. So 4 seconds remain until the end. This is another profit. The second profit is already there. What will I do now? In principle, this amount of money will be enough for me. So I would like to lower the entry amount here and go look for another situation on the hourly chart. Euro AUD. I like the situation and I would consider entering a short position on Euro AUD. No, Euro AUD, 4 minutes. Let's go on that. Well, what's the matter? Hello? Really? No, I haven't even turned it on. Euro out? You feel it, right? You feel it? Don't you want to open Euro out for me? So why are you going for a raise? The zones of interest closed like that. They closed here. 1,200. There was a buyer. No, it won't fall. Euro out for 4 minutes. Damn, well, that's not much. Let's have more. 300 for a raise. I'll prepare 750 now for a catch up and explain why now. In principle, there's an entry for a decrease. So I'll mark this stop here. I'll see that right here, my volumes were very high, meaning the interest in buying and selling increased. And this whole area, in principle, can be considered as one region. Probably I'll take this stop for myself as well. 2 stops where a buyer might appear who can do something. Now look, from this point last time, the upward movement happened for no reason. Here I can say that there was an interest in buying. There are large volumes here from which you can take an entry for an increase. Now, a seller is coming here. We see a retracement movement. The buyer is not increasing. The seller is increasing. If there is indeed a good buyer here, we should now observe a movement upwards, not this, more or less constant cross, right? So it turns out that the proper buyer is not present here because we are observing a cross. Instead of the candle that the buyer should be making, since he bought up the movement, because from here we had a good upward movement. This candle closed in this area. By the cluster, it closed on the seller. The zone of interest is very, very strong. So we closed below the zone of interest, which is in our favor. Plus, we closed in a place where in principle, the seller won by 71 ticks. And judging by the volume present in the candle above and the buyer here, the seller looks a bit stronger. A good buyer appeared, this shows us. The buyer was able to roll back the movement. If the buyer were really strong, there should be an upward movement now. He should somehow show himself. We see resistance here. At that moment, the candle was still weakly green, but it was constantly closer to a cross. There you go. The volumes indicated where a buyer might appear in principle, also mentioned. I didn't apply logic right now because in principle, these indicators are actually enough for me to make an entry. But logically, this maximum was made here. Then they let it go down to the nearest local point. And in this situation, we should have been updating our maximum. And now there is a complete humiliation of this buyer according to the trend. We issued 2 good candles and now we are coming here. For what purpose? In order to pass this stop, because there is actually some liquidity here. If I were the seller, I would go lower. Yes. So logically, essentially, there is also an entry for a decrease here. But I repeat, I did not consider logic when opening the trade now. It's really great when you understand what's happening on the chart, not just logically, but it's even better when you know where your next candle might go. If you've analyzed where your next hourly candle might go, and on binary options, you need from 2 to 16 minutes to secure a profit, I think it doesn't get any easier. Shall we wait? Well, 1 plus now I don't make it on time. Remain 26 points. Plus, is there on TradingView, this movement looks like this. All right, the situation has been handled. Looking for another one. I want a promotion in the CAD SHF. CAD SHF 54%. Didn't get lucky. It was unfortunate. There's an interesting moment with GBP CAD. So I think I'll just mark this with a line, but not with this kind of line, with this kind of line. This movement was made on a large volume. I can assume that it's worth coming here. I have the distance to this place. Is there any point for the seller to go lower? What do we have below? That was a stop below. This stop was made. Let me set it now to understand the maximum volume, and we'll make an average volume like this. Let's see what we have now in terms of volumes. But the same thing, that is how interested it is in going to this area. Aha, so that's what it is. Wait, my mistake. So we have already been in this area and we have already bounced off from here. And now we are going to try to update our minimum according to the trend. Woohoo. GBP CAD. Come here. GBP CAD. Here. 4 minutes 300 downwards. Prepare 750. So we'll remove this matter. The buyer was growing on this candle. The seller became a little weaker, but we didn't see that very buyer. More precisely, we saw him after the opening of this candle, and he was immediately suppressed downwards. So the buyer turned out to be weak. How could one foresee the area of interest on this candle? They drove it up, and at the moment of closing, there was a loss of strength, right? So if it was 381 here, at the very bottom, it became 196. Well, that's basically it. Well, there's really nothing more to talk about here. You look at the situation here, and everything becomes clear right away. The only thing is that a pullback movement can still occur after this minimum is removed, even though it was made recently, because it was made on a large volume and the impulse was strong, to say the least. But 4 minutes might be too much. Wow. Look, practically no movement happened. What is this? Why so little? By the way, guys, after reading the comments, I came to the conclusion that people don't watch my videos in full, or they watch them by skipping through. This is, by the way, your major mistake. You just quickly look at the analysis and see the result, and then you're surprised why no one can see all the small nuances in their chart. And everything seems so simple in the videos. Probably because I watch everything closely and watch until the end, not skipping the video. When I was learning, I watched over 800 videos. I watched them so attentively, so as not to miss even a second. There you go. And by the way, for those who watched until this point, let's write in the comments just for fun. It's interesting for you, and it will be interesting for me, yes, to see how many people actually see this moment now. Let's write in the comments. For example, let's write the FX emoji in the comments. How is it written? The FX emoji, the code phrase, and then we'll see. So that's another plus. Now I will definitely set it to 100 because I already feel that this is my limit. It's already too much, and mistakes might start happening now. The breakthrough of this minimum is happening. Everything is basically as expected. That's how it should be. I think it's impossible to predict so much movement. So guys, I know something. By the way, here you can also enter for a decrease. The area of interest is pushing euro dollar. Oh, so we've already worked on this. Look, yes, there was a buyback. It still continues to move down. This is 15 minutes have passed since the candle. So the area of interest is still pushing. Let's just finish on this. Euro dollar, 2 minutes. Analyzing the hourly time frame. Let's do 1 minute. Oh. A little mistake happened. 200. And how much do I owe? Entry for a decrease. Well, I think it's clear, right? There was a good buyback just now. There was an attempt for the buyer to go higher. We suppress this movement, continuing the downward movement. From here, a small buyer might appear. At most, as we saw, look, once a buyback and once what an upward movement occurred. But we are going here, right? Not to fly away. We are going to go through this. And the nearest place where there are actual buying facts is right here, this place. Theoretically, the movement cannot continue. The area of interest was still held down at that moment, but now it has been thrown out upwards. All right. Nevertheless, it remained with the seller and it is restraining. That is, the buyer is coming now and the seller is trying to hold him back. Won't give it up, right? Okay, 2 minutes might be too little for an hourly time frame. We use an entry here by trailing 4 for a decrease. Oops, I'm experiencing some lag. Hello, euro dollar. Everything's fine. For a decrease, damn, I wanted 4. I set it to 4. Why 2? That's it. You feel it, right? It's already starting. Well, I can't sit for so long anymore. Damn, actually, for you, the video is small. It will be like 20 minutes. But right now, at the time of recording, it's already been 40 minutes of video. Can you imagine? It's already hard for me to sit for even an hour watching the charts. I'm so fed up with them. There you go. Let's wait a little while. Maybe, by the way, 2 minutes and the way I set it, I might manage to grab this profit. So basically, there are 8 seconds left until the end. The market is behaving quite predictably, surprisingly for a Monday. That's another profit. And if you need my feedback for me to look at your mistakes and analyze your trading sessions, welcome to the closed community. Not only because there are indicators there, but because you genuinely want to learn trading and you come there not for the indicators. Indicators are just like a candy given to you as a bonus. Well, now I will be wrapping up this video. I hope everyone found it interesting. Give it a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. And now, goodbye.